Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, June 5, 2025. Time in Texas, about 2 p.m. And I'd like to say thank you to Kim C. and Becky D. for extra support for my channel. Some of the things we'll cover today. President Trump, no to Ukraine. And President Trump has a phone call with President Xi. Now let's recall. It was the CCP who orchestrated a coup in the United States of America in 2020. And recently, it was the CCP who orchestrated a coup in South Korea. And that recent attack inside Russia by Ukraine, brought about by the rogue CIA that I will demonstrate, is also linked to the CCP. And Senator Lindsey Graham apparently is a traitor. So let's get started. So we have this coming out, BREITBART. Last week, President Trump's Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the U.S. will begin revoking visas. This is for all individuals in the U.S. Connected to the CCP, including up to 25% of all international students in colleges and universities who are Chinese and who, it's believed, will be found to be connected to the CCP, excuse me, along with students from China who are engaged in critical study fields like chemistry and physics, who it's believed are here to get an education from U.S. universities and colleges and learn and function as spies in the U.S. So way to go, President Trump. He is revoking visas and getting the Chinese spies out of America. Do you think President Trump doesn't remember every single day that it was the CCP who orchestrated a coup in the U.S. in 2020? I think not. We have this from Steve Quayle's aggregate site, Daily Mail. A Chinese couple have been charged with smuggling and bringing in a bioweapon into the U.S. The female, Jian, Jian, that's her last name, 33, was a postdoc student at the University of Michigan. We see once again CCP connected to colleges and universities. Her male accomplice, last name Liu, Liu, 34. Both had been bringing in a fungus, Funcinum gramineum, which, released in the U.S., would destroy U.S. crops, wheat, barley, corn, rice. And this fungus also destroys in humans and livestock, animals, reproduction, and livers. They've been charged with conspiracy, smuggling, making false statements, and visa fraud. So that's going on. And now we have this. Today, President Trump had a call with President Xi of China. And President Trump posted details on Truth Social, saying it was a good conversation about a trade deal, talking about tariffs. China will have a team, President Trump's team. The two teams will meet in the future to be announced, the date and location. President Trump's team will include Treasury Secretary Bissett, Commerce Secretary Lutnick, and U.S. Ambassador to China Jameson Greer. So that's going on. Now, President Xi invited President Trump and Melania to come to China, and President Trump reciprocated with an invitation for President Xi to visit the U.S. They did not discuss Ukraine, Russia, nor Iran. So that's going on. And we have this, that, a recent interview by Danny HAIPHONG with Colonel Wilkerson and Ray McGovern. The plan that Ukraine used to strike against all international treaties, an attempted strike on 5 airfields inside Russia. We understand Russia took out all the drones from 2 fields, and 3 fields were hit, and damage was done to 3 older Tu planes of Russia's nuclear strategic bombers were destroyed. So 3 were destroyed and 2 or 3 were damaged. The damaged planes have already been repaired. However, what the deep state, functioning through the UK, MI6, and the rogue CIA elements and Ukraine brought about, they had drones inside little sheds that the top would lift up. It was a CCP design, Club K weapons, and the drones would come out and attack the airfields against international treaties. According to international treaties, countries with nuclear strategic bombers are to have those bombers parked out in the open so other nations can use satellites and see and count their nuclear bombers. However, we know that Ukraine operates under the guidance of the deep state, which disregards all international treaties. And the planning took 18 months, Operation Spiderweb. And NATO, it's believed, possibly some parts of NATO knew about it, but most likely this was rogue MI6 in UK and rogue CIA. And President Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had no knowledge beforehand of the strike. So that's going on. So those people need to be tracked down, don't they? So 18 months in the planning. And it went against all international treaties. It was designed by the deep state to prompt Russia to do a nuclear strike back and engage Article 5. Get World War III, nuclear war going. Deep state. We have this coming out from Hal Turner's intel. So Russia's response and coordinated with the attacks by Ukraine on 5 legitimate military targets, the airfields. Ukraine also engaged in 3 terrorist acts, and Russia is currently in the process of reassessing the status of Ukraine and possibly lifting the special military operation up to being an anti-terrorist operation by Russia. Ukraine engaged in 3 terrorist attacks. One was on a bridge hitting a civilian train in Bryansk. One hit another civilian train and bridge in Kursk, and one attempt was made that also hit a civilian bridge, the Kerch Bridge between Crimea and Russia. These were terrorist attacks, and President Trump describes them that way also. And so we have, Ukraine, the Operation Spiderweb, the hits on the fields, airfields inside Russia, employed, the use of tractor trailers driven by Russian drivers, all of whom were taken out by the deep state operatives inside Russia. So they drove the tractor trailers near the airfields. They had on them modified sheds, Club K design, and we know that comes from the CCP. They lifted up and the drones came out and attacked the airfields. And this is coming out that Russia now preps for retaliation, which President Trump has described on Truth Social as being a disproportionate hit he believes that will come from Russia on Ukraine. And we have this. President Putin has told President Trump Russia's response to the drone attack on their strategic nuclear bombers, which is against international treaties, and also in retaliation for the terrorist attacks by Ukraine on civilian locations. And also President Trump initiated a discussion with President Putin regarding Iran. President Trump said to President Putin, the U.S. does not believe that Iran should have a nuclear weapon. President Putin, on behalf of Russia, said Russia agrees with that position. So that's going on. And now we have this from Tag 24 News. So we had General Keith Kellogg, President Trump's envoy to Ukraine, greeting a delegation from the Rada, Ukraine's parliament, today, when they found out, and General Kellogg has indicated that Ukraine's attack on Russia triad, part of their triad, their nuclear bombers, was unacceptable. So we see the U.S. and all parties involved with the U.S. interacting with Ukraine, condemning that attack by Ukraine. And we have this. BPEARTHWATCH brings this out. President Trump, it's believed, is going to initiate 20,000 National Guards to help deport illegals. Now, we're familiar with Posse Comitatus that says the U.S. military cannot be engaged in law enforcement activities inside the U.S. However, there have been some changes made so that the illegals in the U.S. are looked at under the Alien Enemies Act as being an invasion, which means the U.S. military can interact and help deport illegals. And we have this inside the U.S. We have the deep state. We know George Soros pays protesters, and these protesters are trying to derail the arrest activities of ICE, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and so on. So far, since President Trump has been inaugurated, 66,000 illegals have been deported. However, it's believed in the U.S. we have 10 to 20 million. So it's going to take more effort. So President Trump, it's believed, is going to authorize 20,000 National Guard to help. Now, this is coming out from BPEARTHWATCH that Ukraine has no money and they are broke, and they had used the money they received from the U.S. to buy weapons, and they have no money left to pay the Ukraine troops. They are $20 billion short in their domestic and defense budgets. Now, today, in the White House, the RITTER Parliament representatives came in. They were led by Ukraine Representative Alexander Dubinsky. And as I said, they were greeted by General Keith Kellogg, who began the meeting by stating that Ukraine's attack on Russia's nuclear planes was unacceptable. And they found out from President Trump's team that the U.S. is giving no more money, weapons, nor intel to Ukraine. So that's going on. No more money, weapons, or intel to Ukraine by the U.S. Washington to Ukraine. End the conflict. So that's going on. And now we have this. This was a great interview by Judge Napolitano of Scott Ritter. And I'd like to also bring this out. Recently, Larry Taylor of Best & Taylor had a word from the Lord, and this was before the drone strikes. And Larry asked the Lord, what's going on? And he had two movies come immediately to mind. Angel Has Fallen and The Civil War. So in Angel Has Fallen, there was a drone attack upon the President of the United States of America. Now, this word from the Lord was given to Larry at least 5 to 7 days before the Ukraine drone attack in Russia. I submit the Lord gave those two movies. One, Angel Has Fallen, to indicate a drone attack of some type that would impact upon the President of the United States. And I believe in Civil War. I had to watch that movie to find out what is the Lord saying here. And I believe I've picked it up. And I believe the second attack that's going to happen and impact President Trump will be some type of directed energy weapon or laser weapon. I don't know. Is this another type of attack that Ukraine will try to perpetrate on Russia? Or is this something that will happen in the U.S.? So I want to bring that out. Now we know what to pray against. So Scott Ritter brought out some interesting information in his recent interview with Judge Napolitano that this attack, so we had the hit by Ukraine on Russia. Scott Ritter puts forth, this was done by rogue CIA and MI6. For certain, President Trump nor Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth knew beforehand that this attack would occur. And it's also being put forth that possibly MI6 also did not inform Starmer. So that's going on. So we have details. The drone hit on Russia was definitely an MI6 operation that went on for 18 months. It's possible this was approved by prior administrations inside UK and also inside the US, not President Trump and not Starmer. And Scott Ritter puts forth that there is a rogue part of the CIA that doesn't answer to any level of the chain of command within the CIA. And they brought about this attack to hit a part of Russia's nuclear triad, and it violates, yes, many international treaties. President Trump and President Putin interacted in a recent phone call, and it's believed that Ukraine put out their own version of what happened, and also with regard to the phone call between President Trump and President Putin. Russia will retaliate and reset Russia's nuclear doctrine. Zelensky is called by Russia a terrorist, and it's believed part of the retaliation will include assassinating Zelensky by Russia, also taking out his residence. And right now, what's on the table with Russia as part of their retaliation is whether Russia will also wipe out the Ukraine parliament. Scott Ritter also says, yes, it will be a week-long bombing program by Russia. Their retaliation, they will kill Zelensky. They will take out permanently all Ukraine infrastructure. Now, routinely, and Scott Ritter brings this out, routinely, when the U.S. is involved in a military conflict, that's the number one thing they do initially, is to take out all infrastructure. This will be all electricity, all internet, I'm assuming water. They will also take out trains, bridges, highways. So that's going on. And so it's being put forth by some analysts. Was this a setup by the deep state to get rid of Zelensky? And Tulsi Gabbard does intel for President Trump. She gets intel from 17 agencies. And it's Scott Ritter puts this forth. Ratcliffe, President Trump's director of the CIA, nor Tulsi Gabbard from 17 agencies had any information before the hit by Ukraine on part of Russia's nuclear triad. Now, Scott Ritter brings this up about Gina Haspel. Gina Haspel. Gina Haspel, former director of the CIA and also a CCP pawn, actively participated in the CCP coup in the United States in 2020. She was leading a CIA group inside Frankfurt, Germany, with computers. That was all being orchestrated by the CCP to change and flip votes in the presidential election of 2020. Gina Haspel, former director of the CIA, was on site in Frankfurt, Germany, with the CIA team flipping the votes. The U.S. military came in, a special forces group, 6 of the U.S. military were shot dead by CIA operatives. Gina Haspel was also shot and wounded by the U.S. military. She was then arrested and taken to Gitmo. So that's going on, and now we have this. So Scott Ritter brings this out. Even Gina Haspel called Bloody Gina, who had managed actual CIA torture sites outside the U.S., Bloody Gina, even she could not control the rogue CIA bases outside the U.S. So the CIA Russia base don't answer to the CIA chain of command. President Trump did not know about the attack. Secretary of Defense Hegseth did not know. And other, Ratcliffe did not know, the current head of the CIA. Who did know, it appears, was Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Blumenthal, who went to Ukraine just before the attack, and it's being put forth. And I had information from a Patriot subscriber that another person was there. She was a former senator from Arizona. She's openly bisexual, openly LGBTQ, and she ended her term in January of 2025 and then became a consultant to a lobbying group and also a crypto group. She was with Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal on their trip to Ukraine. It's believed that Lindsey Graham, Blumenthal plus engaged in sedition, acting against the United States of America, violating the Logan Act. A senator may not participate nor direct foreign policy. That's up to the president. So, and they went there contradicting President Trump, and then left Ukraine and went to other locations in Europe, drumming up World War III. So we see Lindsey Graham, as I put out in a previous video, is he a traitor or a patriot? We see evidence coming out that he is definitely a traitor, along with Blumenthal and other members of the U.S. group who went to Ukraine just before the drone attack. So we have this being put forth by Scott Ritter and many other American citizens who are awake. The U.S. needs to dissolve the CIA. And Russia is right now recalling their ambassadors. That would be from the U.S. and other European nations prior to hitting back against Ukraine. And we have this. It's believed by Scott Ritter that Russia will use the Oreshnik, a formidable weapon, and that they will take out Zelensky and possibly take out the Ukraine parliament and take out all infrastructure inside Ukraine. So that's going on. And now we have this. Yeah, the drone hit on Russia, Ukraine. It was a Ukraine operation, but actually it was a deep state operation via the rogue MI6 in UK and the rogue CIA out we believe these rogue CIA operatives were operating from Europe. And now Russia prepares to retaliate, and it is believed by Scott Ritter to be a week-long, huge bombing operation. Let's not forget the CCP orchestrated the coup in the United States in 2020, recently orchestrated the coup in South Korea, and currently have inside the U.S. 1.2 million CCP military age males. Where they are, we do not know. And I would like to reiterate that word from the Lord to Larry Taylor. I believe Angel Has Fallen was an indicator of the drone attack. I believe the Civil War is an indicator of some type of attack involving directed energy weapons or lasers. So it's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.